Hello, I am Julie Hatch with Mums on a Mission. Welcome to this episode of my Mums on a Mission podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about ADHD, which is a lot of kids and a lot of adults are diagnosed with ADHD, and there's a lot of medications going around treating ADHD. So my guest who I have here today is my very own son who has ADHD. And just to give you a little bit of a background, these days ADHD, it's one diagnosis, ADHD. Back when he was younger, there was also ADD, which is without hyperactivity, and that's called the inattentive type of ADHD, where it's more inattention and lack of focus and less hyperactivity. And Corbett, I think that's what you would agree. Well, that's what I thought that you had, was just inattentive. You weren't hyperactive, you weren't out of control or terribly impulsive. So anyways, so ADHD is now ADHD, and encompasses both the hyperactive and the solely inattentive, and then there's a combination. So I'm going to tell my story about having Corbett as a son with ADHD, and then he's going to take over and talk about his experiences in ADHD, which is much more informative because he's the one that has it. So I think back in fourth grade or so, the school told me that Corbett was having a hard time organizing himself and getting things done and focusing and remembering to bring the right things home from school, and what people would think is typical symptoms of ADD or ADHD, which, as a sidebar, really affects executive functioning. And executive functioning is being able to plan, have some time management, to focus, and to have like a step-by-step way of achieving goals. So the school said that he was having problems and I should have him tested for ADHD. So I did, and the test back then, this is, I don't know, 20 years ago now, it was a different kind of a test. I think it was somewhat subjective. And anyways, he came out borderline ADHD. And I felt really strongly about not medicating him. Nobody said strongly, yes, medicate him or don't medicate him. And I felt strongly to not medicate him because it was a drug going into his still developing body and still developing mind. And so he struggled through school. I was not as aware of what he needed help with as I would be now, or as I wish I had been. And so he struggled through school. He was at private school through 8th grade, and then went to the public high school, went on to college. I mean, he's a bright, bright kid. You are a bright, bright kid, Corbett. But he struggled, and I think because he didn't have the executive functions to organize and plan, basically. His notebook coming home from school would have papers flying out of it, and he didn't know where anything was. He didn't know what was still in his locker, what was in his backpack, what was at home. He was really, really disorganized, and I did not do a good job at helping him with that. So anyways, fast forward, he went through high school, he went to college, he even went beyond college. And somewhere along the line there, he ended up trying adderall, I think it was, and found that it really helped. And fast forward more to the past 5 years or so, he has gotten an official diagnosis, has an official doctor, and is officially on adderall. And it's made a huge difference in him, I believe. I think that it slightly masks his, as I've talked about element types, he's a fire type, and it sort of masks that fire type personality, which is what I did not want to cover up when he was younger. But now it works for him to be on adderall, and his element type is what it is. And his adderall is helping him, I think, we'll find out shortly, is helping him get along in the world with jobs or with working and focusing and organizing and all that kind of stuff. So Corbett, that's my version of your trip with Adderall, or your journey with Adderall. I'm going to start off with just a couple of questions. Do you want to correct me on any of that before we get started?
No, that all sounds pretty accurate. I would say story checks out in terms of the lack of ability to organize and plan, and just kind of have a clear mind state and set of goals at a young age that never really, won't say occurred to me. It just never really was something that I was aware of or knew that I should be practicing, especially in grade school. So yeah, no, that all sounded accurate.
Clear, so a clear mind state. Can you say anything more about that?
Sure. It was mostly just my experience, like looking for thrill, wanting to have fun with friends, video games, anything that gave that instant gratification immediately through entertainment, really.
Yeah.
And I just didn't find that in anything academic. So school was just in the back of my brain, and having fun was in the front.
Yeah. And you know that I am big into these element types, and that is very much a fire element type, but not all fire element types have ADHD. A lot of them do, but not all of them. So when were you aware? I thought that it started around fourth grade. When were you aware that, or did you ever become aware that maybe you weren't like the other kids, or that you were struggling more than you should be, or did you not really pay attention to that?
Yeah, so I didn't pay attention to that. Like honestly, that was probably I'm not even high school, like early into college, because I didn't. I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't like I knew I wasn't like doing like well in school or like excelling, but it didn't really bother me, I guess. And I didn't feel the need to get my things in order until I was in college for an English degree, and I was like, this isn't really what I want to be doing. Why am I here? What can I be doing better, and how can I do it?
Uh-huh.
And so that's kind of when I became aware of, like, I guess ADHD. I'm not really sure. Aware of that, I wasn't really living up to my full potential had I had the ability to focus and plan, and have goals. Really,
Yep. And did that subsequently make you feel like you were not as smart as really you are? Did it make you feel less smart? Or
sort of, not so much because like I saw it more as like opportunity, to like achieve, to like find the potential. And it wasn't so much like I've never really compared myself, so it wasn't like a negative thing of like I'm not smart. It was more like, okay, now that I'm aware, what can I do? How can I do it? And so it was really just kind of motivation, I suppose.
okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. Um, do you remember liking anything academically about school? I'm thinking more about, well, no, I'm thinking about middle school and high school. Did you like anything academic, or was it all fun and games and sociability?
It was all fun and games. I mean, I appreciate literature and everything that it has to offer, and I like English. But in terms of like really like putting work and energy into it, no, there was legitimately nothing that sparked my interest. It was really just, and it didn't bother me either. There was no stress involved with that. When I knew I was taking a gap year, that eventually going to community college, it was just kind of like whatever.
Uh-huh.
Um, but no, there wasn't any academic side that was really focused on or enjoyed, really.
Yep. And you have since found certain things that you are really interested in and doing well at. If the school, and again, I'm really thinking of middle school, if they had somehow found something to really grab your interest, maybe having to do with what you're doing now, I don't know, would that have made a difference? Or do you think that was probably not likely to happen at that age?
That's a good question. I think that probably would have made a difference. Like they don't really teach personal finance in school, especially high school or grade school, um, and things of that nature. Just kind of like life lessons, and that is kind of what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And so maybe if they had some other, not just because it's obviously math based, but I don't love math, and you're not learning about personal finance through algebra. Uh, so maybe if they had something along that line in the
Maybe,
curriculum, that would have. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
something that you would like, or maybe more practical that kids can relate to and say, oh yeah, I can use this in this other thing that I like. Something like
Right.
that, maybe.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, so eventually you got on Adderall, and mm, can you describe the difference? Like can you just describe the difference between not being on Adderall and then being on Adderall?
Sure. I mean, this is pretty, I think everyone too. It's like, I mean, Adderall is a psychostimulant. So anyone that takes it is going to feel good, like naturally. But for me, it was more uh, a view of my life and how I was doing things in an objective manner, sort of, I
Uh-huh.
guess. There weren't all just, okay, what's next in order to feel good. It's what can I do to feel good a year from now,
Yeah.
and things of that nature. So it's kind of put everything on a broad scale, I would say, with a clear view of what it was, how to do it. And that's nothing I'd ever experienced really. It
So it's
was,
kind of planning.
yeah, exactly. And just got rid of anxiety about being nervous about the future, not knowing what you want to do, things of that nature. And so it was night and day. It was, yeah, it was like, I don't know, it's like someone removed the shades from the window, I guess.
Wow. And it's really, I just want to make sure I get this straight because this is enlightening for me. So it's maybe the biggest, one of the biggest things was that it helped you to see the future, plan for the future, know that your future is okay.
Yes. And instead of having 10 different things in my mind, scattering back and forth between, like, which you're never going to be able to focus on one thing. If you have so many things running through your head and you're thinking about one thing and another thing comes up, you're never going to get anything done. So it was really just kind of like a one track mind type thing, I guess. And just with clarity was the biggest thing.
That's great. So, it seems like medication certainly is the right thing for you, as I'm sure it is for a lot of people. I sometimes think that just because a kid is hyperactive doesn't mean that you need to put a medication in them to make them sit still. I just think that that's wrong. But you are putting it in a completely different perspective and get different kinds of effects.
Well, I think there's a lot of merit to not wanting to give a fourth grader drugs. I mean, I didn't start taking it until my brain was developed, and there wasn't any kind of, or there were less variables, I guess, in terms of development. And I can see certainly how children on something like Adderall, especially with something like ADHD, and back then it was more subjective than it is now.
Yeah.
It's like you don't really know what the long term effects are when you give it to them that young. So it's really tough. Like I would never say, hey, yes, do this or do that. If one thinks that the kid has ADHD, but in terms of later in life, yeah, it's certainly helped me. It's been life changing, really. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great. I'm glad. Can you tell me what went into the diagnosing process of, because again, it's a lot different than it was 20 years ago. What was the procedure of getting, or the process of getting diagnosed with it?
Yeah, so I had to start with my primary care, who referred me to a psychiatrist who I met with a handful of times just to do like just informal interviews, so she could get to know me. And then after three of those, she referred me to a different psychiatrist who did the actual neuropsych evaluation. And that was about 4 hours of testing,
Wow.
memory testing, reaction testing, just cognitive function testing, really. And then through that, it was, from what I understand, pretty clear that, yep, kid has ADHD. uh, and so it's a process, but it's a good thing it's a process because it was just given out that I think it would be widely abused.
Yeah. And it's also more of a, it seems like more of a, um, well, more of a process than it was back a while ago when they just used to give out questionnaires, go to the parent and the teacher and maybe the doctor. And so it was pretty subjective.
Right. And was this with Hirsch? Is that when the
Yep.
first testing was?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So I do remember some forms of testing with him. So I don't know. Then there were similar ones in my recent tests.
Yep.
But it was, from what I remember, a lot more in depth this time around than it
Yeah.
was back in fourth grade.
Did you end up getting a CAT scan or any kind of imaging study?
No, there's nothing
Okay.
like that. But I don't know what that would, I'm not really sure that would be
I know. I don't either.
useful.
Maybe to rule out something really bad. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
So your relationship with Adderall, you are really quite happy with Adderall. You're pretty happy with your life. What are you doing with your life now?
So this isn't really gonna help my argument because I'm not like I don't work a 9 to 5 or anything like
No,
that.
that's
But
okay.
I've found tons of interest in um, statistical analysis from a conceptual standpoint, I would say, which initially led me to poker, and that's what I was doing for, I don't know, 3 years, on and off here and there, working odd jobs as well. And since then then I really became interested in stocks and technical analysis and equity analysis. I think when I was 19 or 20, when I really first started taking Adderall and like going to the library, my own cognizance for hours a day and just doing my own research,
Yeah.
just finding out what I liked. And because I've always wanted to make money, I guess. And maybe that goes hand in hand with ADHD and gratification and all that. But learning and trying to figure out how to do that in a productive and I guess intellectual manner is what I found interesting. And so from poker, stock market, and now trading crypto, which I'm sure your listeners will have mixed opinions on. But
That's all right.
yeah, no, it's total statistical analysis and yeah, things of that nature.
So you're coming across as really very smart. I don't know if you found out what your IQ was, but you're obviously very intelligent, and that was not coming to light when you were scattered and disorganized and couldn't figure out what to do next, right?
Well, it's interesting because I think part of the IQ is emotional intelligence, and I think that's never really been something that was hindered by ADHD. I mean, it doesn't get you very far in school.
Yeah.
But understanding people, I think, is something I've always had a knack for. And yeah, ADHD didn't really hinder that, I don't think, but
Okay.
Adderall also doesn't take away that.
Yeah.
And that obviously helped me in things like poker, but also just like getting through life and making interpersonal relationships and things like that. So I think the Adderall has helped on the productive side,
Yep.
while also not hindering the emotional or meta aspect of life that helps develop relationships and connect with people.
It hasn't hindered that.
No, not at all.
Okay. Yeah, that's your the
Like
fire personality. Let's go ahead.
Right. So maybe outwardly the fire personality is a little bit tamed, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that that's still part of mostly who I am. And in my mind, that still comes out and shows, and especially with relationships.
Yeah.
Friends and all that.
Good. Well, this is really actually this is really helpful to me because I think that this is really helpful to me because I shouldn't just automatically say, kids shouldn't be put on medications. I do kind of blanketly say that, and it shouldn't be blanket, but obviously it's done a huge difference for you. And it's helped you to get to where you're at financially and professionally and where you're at.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, more about science and medicine than I do. So I don't like. I mean, I would never tell someone what to do or what not to do. So I don't really know about children and
Right.
stimulants, but it's helped me for sure.
Yeah, well, that's really good to know. And if you had, I don't know if you have anything so parents are listening to this or will be listening to this or watching this, and there are a lot of kids that are being questioned whether they have ADHD or not, and parents don't know what to do about that. Is there anything that you would say to a parent about what it's like to have ADHD, what their kid is feeling or thinking like, other than which you've already done quite well? And again, we won't go into medication or whether they should or shouldn't, but help them understand how they could help their child, how to understand their child, what is their child feeling or thinking or perceiving the world. I don't know if you have anything to add to what you've already said.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit tough because for me, like, it wasn't like if you had asked me in fourth, fifth grade, whatever, I would have just said nothing's wrong. Like this is like, what do you mean? So I want to say teaching discipline, I think has a lot to do with it that could help kids because that's really just what it affected the most for me. And whether that can be taught in someone that has ADHD or not, I don't know. But I think that that's where I would start as a parent if things were if they were expressing symptoms or having trouble in school.
That the parents should exercise discipline on the child.
Yeah, not like punishment or anything like that, but like healthy ways to kind of show why planning and setting goals is important and future proofing. Really, I mean, it's hard for like a kid to understand, especially when they just want to have fun. And that's what I think where the discipline comes in. It's like there's somewhere sometimes where you do have to, you know, as a parent, I would say,
Yeah,
like really force something.
some
And if
boundaries.
they, right, yes, and it might like suck at the time, and the kid's gonna hate it, but I think that it would be massively beneficial for their later development.
Good to know. They need some boundaries. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for kids exploring themselves and figuring out what they like and stuff. But when it's just limitless, it's so easy to become distracted with things that are only helping you immediately and not considering the future.
Yep, that totally makes sense. Limitless options are not necessarily beneficial.
Yeah, you can have a fire, just make sure the fire's not huge, you know?
Yep, very well put. Okay, I don't think I had anything else that I wanted to ask you. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Not particularly.
Okay.
I think we covered quite a bit. I hope I
No,
gave
you
a,
did. That was a good description of, those were my questions. Describe yourself in middle school and high school, and it didn't seem to bother you.
no, it didn't. It certainly didn't. And I don't know. Life's tough and it's also subjective. So I don't know. Like everyone's gonna be fine at the end of the day. No worries.
There you go. That's right. If you believe that you're going to
Yeah.
be fine, you are going to be fine. All right. Well, Corbett, thank you very much. And that's been really helpful to me. And I am sure that it's been really helpful to other listeners and viewers. And I will end this recording and talk with you soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Bye. Thank you.